Hey everybody, it's Amy Head with New Perspectives for Life here in Marietta, Georgia on this first day of spring, March 20th, 2014. And it is actually a beautiful day here in Marietta. We have blue skies and sunshine, and the temperature is supposed to get up into the mid-60s today. So we've got all the elements of spring before us on this first day of spring. I hope you're doing well today wherever you are, and I'm glad you chose to share some of this time together with us. I thought what we could talk about today, I just finished a corporate workshop for my corporate client. I do a monthly lunch and learn there. It is for a bunch of nuclear engineers and people and support staff that work with the nuclear engineers, and I go out every month. And we are in a series right now on happiness, the topic of happiness, which I think is really appropriate as we are here in the beginning of spring now, and flowers are blooming and trees are budding and everything seems to be coming back to life from sort of the blah of winter. And so it's really a good time to look at this topic of happiness. So I thought I'd just share with you a couple of thoughts from the workshop this morning. And you're going to hear some noise in the background probably while we're spending our time together. They're doing a lot of upgrades and improvements to our office property here, which is great. So you'll probably hear some rumblings of that as we go through our time together today. So in thinking about the topic of happiness, sometimes what comes to mind also is sort of the opposite, which would be, discontent, even sometimes depression. Because when somebody is feeling low or is not finding happiness in their lives or finding that things just aren't working out, a lot of times that can lead to some depression or at least some depressive symptoms. It might not be clinical depression, but it would definitely be some symptoms where they are just not feeling good. They're not feeling happy. So we wanted to talk a little bit about where do we derive our happiness from? Where do we go when we search for happiness? Where do we search? Where do we go to look to find happiness? And in the workshop today, we were talking about that a lot. That was sort of our focal point today. And we came up with a couple of ideas that I wanted to share with you. There are really kind of two general categories of places where we look to find happiness. One is from the external events and things outside of us. The other is from the internal things within us. And the difference there is not just where we're looking, but what we find, and then how long the happiness remains with us. So in thinking about that for you, are you someone who tends to search for happiness from an external vantage point, where you're looking for the next thing, the next event, the next activity, the next thing coming up in your life to supply your happiness? For example, does happiness come from the activities that you're involved with, the vacation, the new car, the new home, maybe another kind of purchase that you made, maybe a relationship, maybe the weather? Does happiness for you come from things outside of you? Or does happiness generally tend to come from the internal perspective, from things within you? Those would be the things like our thoughts, our beliefs, our hopes, our dreams, our attitude, even our gratitude. Those are the things within us that can be the place where we go to find happiness. Now, probably, like most of us, we look to the external and the internal for happiness. But I think the key is, which one do you tend to gravitate more towards? Because it results in things a little bit differently depending on where you look. So if we tend to look at the external for our happiness, then what we're going to find is that when we acquire whatever it is that we think will bring us happiness, we're happy. But at some point, because the acquisition has already happened, we already got what we were hoping for, what we were looking for, then sometimes at some point that happiness or the level of happiness will wear off. And what happens is, because the happiness doesn't really remain at that same level, and sometimes it's an intense level when the event or the situation or whatever it is happens, then it kind of puts us on this constant hunt for the next thing of happiness. So we get what we want, we think it's going to make us happy, it does, but then the happiness wanes. And so the next thing in order to do is to pursue the next thing. And a lot of times those things are independent of each other. It's different from the internal, because with the internal, when we go to the internal for happiness, those are going to be things that come more from us, independent of what's happening outside of us. So for example, if we have an expectation, or we have a hope, or we have a belief or an attitude around happiness, then we are going to take ourselves with those internal things into whatever situation we may find ourselves. And whatever happens in the situation, whether good, bad, or indifferent, we will still tend to find happiness in it. A good example of that is of both, I guess, is if, let's say you're going to go on vacation. And let's say you plan your vacation for the beach. And let's say when you get down there, you see the forecast, or even before you leave, you see the forecast, and it looks like it's going to be straight storms and showers for all 5 days that you're going to be at the beach for vacation. Well, if your happiness source tends to lean towards the external, then you're already going to have thoughts that lead toward unhappiness. Oh my gosh, this is going to be a nightmare. The weather's going to be terrible. We're not going to get to do anything. It's going to be so bad. It's going to be a waste of money, on and on and on. And when you get there, if all that plays out, you're probably not going to be very happy. On the other spectrum, same vacation, beach, same week, same bad weather. If you're operating from an internal sense of happiness, then you're going to have a different experience. Your thoughts are going to go more along the lines of, well, it's still a vacation, at least I get to get away, I can just bring books, we can do other things. You're going to find a different way of looking at it, because your happiness is not dependent on what's external, it's within you. That's a huge difference even in dealing with some of the depression symptoms or just feeling down, because we tend to feel down and depressed a lot of times because of the things outside of us that aren't going well. Also, though, we tend to feel depressed or down sometimes because of the messages that we're giving ourselves in our minds. Maybe they're self-defeating, maybe they're self-sabotaging, they're just kind of, we think negatively about ourselves, and that can lead us to spiral down. So a good thing to think about when we're thinking about happiness is, where do we go for our sense of happiness? Do we go to the external, or do we go to the internal? Because with the external, we're going to always be on the hunt for the next thing to make us happy, and that happiness then will be fleeting. If we go to the internal, then that internal reservoir and resource kind of builds on each other and carries us through to the next event and circumstance, but our happiness is not dependent upon wherever we're going or whatever we're doing, because we're bringing that from within.